This is Greek with David Hutchison. Imperfect and Aorist Active Indicative. We're studying today the imperfect and the aorist. These are two past tense verbs. Each one is a little bit different. The imperfect suggests an ongoing action in the past, such as I was walking. It's that action in progress idea. The aorist talks about an action that occurred in the past, but it doesn't make any comment on the duration of the activity. So we would simply say something like, I walked. So imperfect, action in progress, aorist, no comment. The word aorist, and this is not a word you've probably ever seen before, but the word aorist simply means undefined. So think aorist, no comment. The distinction that we're talking about here is one of aspect. Aspect is a word that means kind of action. Kind of action. So to form these past tense verbs, we're going to put some things before the verb stem and some things after the verb stem. So remember back when we studied present active indicative, we had one box, we'll just call that the verb meaning box, and then we put endings. We used the number 1 endings. Then we said, all right, let's do some future verbs, and right in between, let's add a sigma. That sigma will be a big sign saying, hello, future. Well, we're going to do the same type of thing today. We've got one box where we've got the verb meaning. We've got some endings. Let's use number 2 endings for these. Now we're going to put some stuff right in between, and we're going to put some stuff right before. One big box in front of both of these verbs that's going to say past tense, past tense, past tense. And then on the aorist, we're going to have a box that's going to go right here, and it's going to say sigma alpha. That's a big key for aorist. So if you think of yourself as a detective trying to figure these things out, what you're going to get now is more clues to help you out. So here are some new endings. I call these the number 2 endings. They're the secondary active endings. This is the second set of verb endings that we've learned. New, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. New, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. And if you want a silly song to help you remember it and maybe never get it out of your head, new, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. New, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. New, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. New, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. You remember that song? Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, now I've poisoned it for you. New, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. So these are the number 2 endings. New, sigma, movable new, min, te, new, or son. So let's look first at the imperfect active indicative. Remember, this is the one that has action in progress. Augment, number 2 endings. 2 keys. Augment, number 2 endings. What are 2 keys to imperfect active indicative? That'll be a question I ask. What are the 2 keys? Augment, number 2 endings. Augment, number 2 endings. So what is an augment? The augment is something that's going to come before the verb stem, and it can take 3 different forms. The most common, I would guess, is the epsilon. you're going to put an epsilon right before the verb stem if the verb starts with a consonant. The second type we'll call a lengthening. This is a vowel lengthening. If the verb starts with a short vowel, we're going to lengthen it to a long vowel. So if we had an alpha, it would lengthen to eta. If we had an epsilon, it would lengthen to eta. And if we had an omicron, it would lengthen to omega. So far we've got two things. We've got epsilon, we've got lengthening, and then the third one is called no change. Why does this happen? If the verb already starts with a long vowel, or if it starts with a long diphthong, then there's no change. Three forms for an augment: epsilon, lengthening, no change. If the verb starts with a consonant, we're going to do epsilon. If the verb starts with a short vowel, we're going to do lengthening. Long vowel, long diphthong, no change. Epsilon, lengthening, no change. So here's an example with luo. This starts with a consonant, so we would add the epsilon before, and so we would have lu. If we had akuo, this is a short vowel, an alpha. This is going to lengthen to eta, so we would have aku. And then heurisco, here we have no change. It would simply stay the same, heur. So three things for an augment: epsilon, lengthening, no change. So how are we going to form the imperfect? We're going to put an augment before the verb stem, an augment before lu. We're going to use the number 2 endings, nu, sigma, movable nu, mente, nu, or son. We're going to use those. And we're going to use connecting vowels right in between. So remember the rule: omicron before mu or nu, epsilon before everything else. Omicron before mu or nu, epsilon before everything else. So here's our verb stem lu. By the way, luo is not very common in the New Testament, but here's why we use it. It is very regular. So it's going to behave the way we want it to behave. So this is why we always use luo. So we've got the verb stem lu. We're going to put an augment right at the very beginning. Notice it's an augment, the epsilon, smooth breathing mark. So augment at the beginning, then the verb stem, then we're going to do connecting vowels, number 2 endings. Nu, sigma, movable nu, mente, nu, or son. Here it happens to be nu. Eluon, elus, elue with movable nu. Eluamen, eluete, eluon. Imperfect, active, indicative. We've got augment in front, then we've got number 2 endings, and of course the connecting vowels. We would translate it: I was loosing. This is this action in progress in past tense. I was loosing. You were loosing. He, she, or it was loosing. We were loosing. You were loosing. They were loosing. So your base translation of imperfect is was or were plus the ing form of the verb. Now the aorist active indicative. We've got 3 keys: augment, sigma alpha, number 2 endings. Augment, sigma alpha, number 2 endings. So we're going to put an augment before lu, and once again the augment could be an epsilon, could be a lengthening, could be no change. Augment, lengthening, no change. So the augment on the front. Then we're going to put a sigma alpha right after that verb stem. A sigma alpha is a great aorist key. A great aorist key. If you see a sigma alpha in the middle of a verb, ask yourself, I wonder if this thing could be aorist. Then we're going to do number 2 endings: nu, sigma, movable nu, mente, nu, or son. Okay? So we've got lu, we've got our verb stem. Where are we going to put the augment? Where are we going to put the augment? Right at the very beginning. So let's put it there. Got the augment, Then we're going to add sigma alpha right after the verb stem. And then we're going to go ahead and add our endings. So the first singular, it switches a little bit. It doesn't use that new. But we've got blank, sigma, movable new, mente, and then new. Later on, you'll see when we're going to learn the son. But for now, you've seen that it's blank, sigma, movable new, mente, and then new. So elusa, elusas, eluse, elusamen, elusite, eluson. Blank, sigma, movable new. Now notice on that third singular form, it switches to epsilon. This is really good news for us because it helps us to distinguish between first singular and third singular. That's a bit helpful. Elusa, elusas, eluse, elusamen, elusite, eluson. Now this would translate in the simple past tense. I loosed. You loosed. He, she, or it loosed. We loosed. You loosed. They loosed. Do you remember how we translated the imperfect? I was loosing. That was action in progress. That was imperfect. The aorist, this one right here, simple past tense. I loosed. No comment on the action. When you studied future tense, remember when we said that sometimes when sigma bumps into other letters, certain changes take place? This was a process called amalgamation. Well, let's review those rules because the same things happen when the sigma from sigma alpha bumps into other letters. So we have p beta or phi plus sigma equals psi. Kappa gamma chi plus sigma equals xi. Or tau delta theta plus sigma simply equals sigma. The first letter drops out. This process will take place when a sigma bumps into these letters on the aorist forms. So we've got two past tense forms. We've got the imperfect and we've got the aorist. The imperfect implies an ongoing action in the past. I was running, if you remember Forrest Gump, running all over the place. I was running. We were talking. So this is action in progress, past tense. The aorist is past tense, but it doesn't tell us anything about the duration of the action. Some people have compared the imperfect to a video, several seconds, several minutes, who knows, and the aorist to a photograph. All you've got is one still moment in time. The photograph is not saying that this didn't take 1 hour or 20 hours, but all the photograph is doing is clicking one moment in time. So the aorist is just grabbing that one moment. It's not commenting on the action, but the imperfect is commenting on the action. It's telling you it was action in progress, and I'm going to tell you about it. So for simple past tense on the aorist, it would be something like, I ran. We talked. Might have been 5 minutes, might have been 50 hours, no comment. So for now, translate the imperfect, I was loosing. It's was or were plus the ing form of the verb. And for now, translate the aorist with the simple past tense, I loosed. And of course, context can indicate other nuances. I will go ahead and point out a couple regarding the imperfect. If there is enough context to suggest it, you could translate the imperfect, I kept loosing, or I began loosing. I kept loosing, I began loosing. What you have to have, though, is enough context to suggest these. Now, there are other nuances as well, but these are enough for now. Have you ever eaten a rice cake? Pretty bland, pretty tasteless, pretty flavorless. The aorist is the rice cake of the tenses. There's not much to it. It's pretty bland. It's not very flavorful. The imperfect has a bunch of flavor to it. It's telling you more things about it. Maybe you've had ice milk. Not much taste to it. Barely there. It's a little bit sweet. Maybe. That's the aorist. Whereas the imperfect is chocolate chip ice cream, or it's chocolate chip cookie dough, or it's rocky road. So the aorist is plain, simple, boring, no comment. The imperfect has a lot of flavor, has a lot of taste. Now there's a second way that we can form the aorist. There's a second way of forming the aorist, and here's the fancy name that it's called, second aorist. It's a second way of forming the aorist. It's a different way of doing it, but other than that, it means the exact same thing as the first aorist. There's nothing special about a second aorist, except it just forms it a little bit differently, which is exactly the same as what English does. Because in English, we form the past tense in different ways. Sometimes in English, you put an ed on the end of a verb to make it past tense. The past tense of walk is walked. The past tense of talk is talked. The past tense of listen is listened. Sometimes in English, you change the word. So run, you don't runned, you ran. In speak, you don't say I speaked to the boy, you say I spoke. Instead of write, we don't say righted, we say wrote. Now, why do these changes happen? They just do. Why do they happen in Greek? They just do. There's nothing special about them. It's just a different way of forming the past tense aorist. So what is the exegetical significance of a second aorist? It's just the exact same thing as a first aorist in terms of its meaning, which is basically no comment. It's past tense, no comment. There is no special exegetical significance. Learning Greek will help you to know when certain nuances matter and when certain nuances don't matter at all. What you don't want to do is get up into your Bible study or your pulpit and start pontificating on the exegetical significance of a second aorist compared to a first aorist. You'll be blabbering nonsense. Now, most of the people won't have any idea what you're talking about, so they won't know the difference. But some people might, and they will say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This lady is crazy. And this is a good time for me to make this point. I think of the Greek work that you're doing like the backside of a tapestry or the backside of a felt stocking. You ever seen a stocking? One of these felt stockings? If you look on the inside of the backside, what you see is all kinds of crazy strings going every which way. It's not very good to look at. If you look at the backside of a tapestry, it's messy, it's not pretty, there's no wonderful design. But when you flip it over, you see a beautiful picture. To me, Greek is the backside of the tapestry. It's the backside of the stocking. It's the messy part that makes the front side, the Bible study or the sermon, look beautiful. It doesn't draw attention to itself, but it makes the sermon, it makes the Bible study beautiful. So here's my thing. Very rarely should you be talking about Greek in your sermon. And if you do, you should do it in the plainest, simplest terms. Maybe you say, the Greek term for this word means such and such. But if you start rambling on about Greek, nobody's going to know what you're doing. And really, 99% of the time, the reason that people ramble on about Greek in a sermon is to make themselves look smart. And that is not gospel, that is folly. So don't do it. So do all the hard work, but you don't do all the hard work to draw attention to it. You do all the hard work to make the front side beautiful, to make it intelligible. Remember, the point of communicating is to communicate. And if people don't understand what you're saying, you're not communicating. Now, yes, you can raise their level up a little bit, so there's room for that. But really what you have to do is you have to guard your heart. And you have to know, am I doing this simply to look smart, to try to sound intelligent, or am I doing this to try to communicate as effectively as possible? So how does this second aorist work? Instead of sigma alpha, which was a big giant aorist key, second aorist changes the stem. So our verb lambano, it changes to lab. And pasco, which means to suffer, it changes to path. And fugo, to flee, I flee, it changes to fugue, but notice there's just a slight difference in spelling. Epsilon, upsilon, to simply upsilon. You're not going to be able to predict whether a verb is going to do this or not, but all you have to do is look up in a lexicon, and it will tell you what is the aorist form. If it looks like it's got a stem change, well then guess what? You have a second aorist. 3 keys to second aorist active indicative. Augment, still the same. Stem change, here's our big difference. Stem change and number 2 endings. 3 keys. Augment, stem change, number 2 endings. So here we've got the verb stem lab. This is from lambano. So we've got the stem. This is the stem change. We're going to put the augment on front. Then you've got the stem that's already changed. And then we're going to do number 2 endings. New, sigma, movable, new, mente, new. Elaban, elabes, elabe, elabaman, elabete, elaban. You would translate it exactly the same as if you had a first aorist. I took, you took, he, she, or it took, we took, you took, they took. 99% of the time, a verb is either going to have a first aorist or a second aorist, but not both. Probably about 1% of the time, maybe even less than 1% of the time, certain verbs have both. Don't worry about it. If you see it, you see it. If you don't, you don't. So the imperfect form that we started off with and the second aorist form that we just looked at, these are going to look a lot alike because they both use the augment. They both use number 2 endings. The one thing that's going to differentiate them is going to be that stem change. Pay attention to the stem change. If you know the spelling of the vocab word in its normal form, its lexical form, you'll be able to distinguish it when you see the stem change. If you're not sure, we'll just go look it up. So look closely at the stem, at the verb. Does that stem look the same as the present stem? What do you think if it does? Do you have imperfect or do you have second aorist? If it looks the same as the present stem, is it imperfect or is it second aorist? It'd be imperfect because it's the same. If it's different, if it's got that stem change equals second aorist. We've learned the being verb ami in the present tense. Now we want to learn it in the past tense. This is the imperfect indicative of ami. Now remember, being verbs are not active, so we don't say imperfect active indicative. We simply say imperfect indicative. Amen, ace, ain, amen, ate, ason. Amen, ace, ain, amen, ate, ason. Quite a bit of similarities with the number 2 endings. Then you've just got an eta on the very beginning. Amen, ace, ain, amen, ate, ason. Another Greek professor has done songs as well. He does the being verb to the tune of the Mexican hat dance. Amen, ace, ain, amen, ate, ason. His name is Ken Birding. You can buy his CDs. Amen, ace, ain, amen, ate, ason. He has one big song for several forms of the being verb ami, and this is just the past tense part. This simply means I was, you were, he or she or it was, we were, you were, they were. So now, when we're parsing, we've got three new options. We had present, we had future. Now what we have is we have imperfect, we also have aorist, and we have second aorist. And it is best to differentiate between aorist and second aorist. That's a good practice. So let's try to practice some of these. Tell me, is this imperfect or aorist? Let's just think for a moment. Imperfect has augment, number 2 endings. Aorist has augment, sigma alpha, number 2 endings. So this first one, elusamen, this is from the verb luo. Is this imperfect or aorist? They both have the augment, so that's not going to be the distinguishing key. Is there a sigma alpha or is there not? There's a sigma alpha right there. So is this imperfect or is this aorist? This one's aorist. Sigma alpha equals aorist. Ekeruxon, this is from keruso, I preach. And remember, the stem of keruso is keruk. So we've got an augment at the beginning. That's the same for both. Anytime you see that augment, you can go ahead and say past tense. Now right here, we've got a xi alpha. Could there be a sigma alpha hiding in there? We've got a kappa plus a sigma alpha would equal xi. So that's what's going on. So that is a sigma alpha. So does that make it imperfect or does that make it aorist? Aorist. Esodzin. Augment on the front. This is sods plus endings from sodzo. Do we have a sigma alpha in there anywhere? No? No sigma alpha, so this one will be imperfect. Okay, here's a form ain. This is from the being verb ami. We just learned this one. Did I say it was the imperfect indicative or the aorist indicative? This one is imperfect. Okay, now let's try aorist or second aorist. So what you're looking for here is either sigma alpha, aorist, stem change, second aorist. Here's epistiusate from pistuo. Augment on the front, so it's a past tense verb. Sigma alpha, is that aorist or second aorist? Sigma alpha equals aorist. Elipes. This is from lepo. Notice the spelling. Lambda, epsilon, iota, p, omega, L-E-I-P-O. And here we have elipes, lambda, iota, p. Stem change. What is that? Second aorist. Epimpsate. You've got augment on the front, past tense. Psi alpha. This comes from pimpo. P plus sigma alpha. Psa. So that's the sigma alpha hiding in there. Is that aorist or second aorist? Aorist. Now let's go back and look at this chart for a moment on the imperfect. Eluon, elus, elue, eluamen, eluite, eluon. Not sure if you noticed before, the first singular form and the third plural form are exactly the same. How are you going to know which one it is? It's the big word C-O-N-T-E-X-T. Context. Context will help. If you have a plural subject, then what do you think? Do you have a singular verb or a plural verb? If you have a plural subject, you're going to have a plural verb. So contextual factors like that will help. Same thing on second aorist. Notice elabon, first singular, elabon, third plural. How do you know what it is? What is going to be your big giant key? Context. If we were parsing these in a vacuum, which I don't do by the way, but if we were parsing these in a vacuum, you would have to put second aorist either first singular or third plural. But I don't just do plain parsing in a vacuum. Whenever we parse, you have to parse in order to know what's going on. You're doing it whether you put it on paper or not. But when we do it, we always have context. So in context, you don't give me both options. You give me the one that it is. All right, let's practice some sentences. These are going to have some of these verbs. Tous ponerus esodzin ha kurios zoes. So remember, the first thing we want to try to do is to find a verb. The verb is right here. Esodzin. Then we want to find a nominative subject. Ha kurios is our nominative subject. So by itself, esodzin, we have an augment on the front. We have no sigma alpha in here. This is from sozo. I save. So this is going to be imperfect. We have an augment, number 2 endings. This is third singular. He was saving. I can go ahead and write it out, or maybe I'll see if I have a nominative subject. And I do. It's ha kurios. So the Lord was saving. The reason I left a little blank space right here is because I noticed I have a genitive right here. It will tell us something about kurios. The Lord of life. You can either go ahead and grab that at the same time as the noun it modifies, or you can leave a blank space and do it later. If we were just finding verb, subject, object, then our object is going to be over here. The reason I know that is because it's accusative. This is the adjective blank. The adjective blank. Remember, we had 3 different types of adjectives. We had attributive, it modified a noun. We had predicate, it was the predicate of a being verb, it completed a being verb. We have substantival, it doesn't modify a noun, it acts like a noun. That's what we have here. The adjective blank. The evil blank. What is it? Evil what? Well, it's masculine and it's plural, so it's the evil men. The Lord of life was saving the evil men. Now, by the way, I'm not making tons of markings on here. You might want to make many more markings than I make. You might want to say article, adjective, verb, noun, and so forth. You might want to parse every word. You might want to put just singular or plural. You can put a whole bunch of markings. Put as much as you need to do. The further you go, the fewer markings you're going to need. But once you get time to start putting things together, where's your verb? Where's your subject? Where's your direct object? Eblepsin ha kurios. Eblepsin ha kurios. So here's a verb. Here's an article. And here's a nominative subject. So you could go ahead and parse these out. So we've got an augment right here, so I know it's either imperfect or aorist. I've got a psi epsilon. I see that psi and I'm thinking maybe that's a sigma hiding in there. This is from blepo. So blep, a P plus sigma would equal C. So I've got sigma epsilon. This is that third singular form of the aorist. So I've got augment, sigma epsilon, aorist. So aorist, active, indicative, third singular from blepo, IC. So that's, if you want to go ahead and parse it out, I could parse out the article, ha, nominative masculine singular from ha, the, and I could parse out kurios, nominative masculine singular from kurios, Lord. So you can do as much or as little as you want to on the page. Some of it you can do in your head. You may want to just write it all out. By the way, writing things out is linked very strongly with memory. If you're not writing these paradigms out, you're probably not doing as well as you could. So I would write them out. I would also say them. I would take pictures of them and do flashcards. I would try a whole bunch of different things until you find out what really works for you, and then go to town. Okay, so we've got a verb, we've got a nominative subject. So the verb is aorist active indicative, third singular, from blepo. So he saw. Now do I have a subject? If so, I'm going to get rid of my pronoun subject. I do. I have ha kurios. So the Lord saw. The Lord saw. Let's practice another. Ebaptidzete tous anthropous tous pistus. So here is verb, article, noun, article, adjective. On this verb, I've got an augment at the front. I've got no sigma alpha. This is from baptizo. So when I have augment, I have no sigma alpha, I have no stem change. This is going to be imperfect. Augment, and I've got my number 2 endings. This is second plural. You, plural, were baptizing. You're not sure what the ending is? Look at your chart. Have that chart written out on a piece of paper on your desk when you're doing your homework. Obviously not on quizzes or tests, but on homework, have these charts written out. Nous, sigma, movable new, mente, nu, or son. So augment, number 2 endings, imperfect. You, plural, were baptizing. Then we have article, noun, article, adjective. All of these are accusative plural. They're masculine. The men, the faithful. We call this the second attributive position, the men, the faithful. The noun, the adjective. It simply means the faithful men. So you, plural, were baptizing. The faithful men. What if I said the faithful man, singular? Would that be correct or incorrect? That would be incorrect because it's plural. Now I'm going to give you a couple of New Testament examples that occur all the time. Really, the second one does. This first one is a form of it, but it's the next one I'm going to show you that really occurs all the times in the Gospels. Ha de Jesus apen. So I've got an article going with Jesus. This is the word for Jesus. I've got the conjunction de, and then I've got a verb apen. The conjunction de can mean but or now, or you can leave it untranslated. can even mean and. Words are capable of a wide variety of meanings. What you really need is context. So the article goes with Jesus. Hade Jesus apen. But Jesus, that's our nominative subject, and the verb is apen. This verb occurs all the time. It's a second aorist. It means said. But Jesus said. But Jesus said. This verb is a second aorist, active indicative, third singular. Now you would never guess this, but you'll come to know it. It's from Lego, I say or I speak. Actually, what's going on is this is a form for a different verb that basically Lego adopted as its past tense form. So we'll parse it out this way. It's a second aorist, active indicative, third singular, from Lego, I say or I speak. This phrase means, but Jesus said. But Jesus said. Now this is the one that occurs many more times. In this exact order, it occurs 55 times in the Gospels. Hade apen. Hade apen. It's exactly the same as the previous one, except it doesn't have the word Jesus in there. And I'll go ahead and tell you one thing about the article. It can act like a personal pronoun. So it can act like the word he. You don't need to try this at home yet, so to speak, but I do want to tell you it simply because this phrase is so common. You're not going to have to worry about translating it that way probably the rest of the semester. But if you ever saw this phrase, you're sitting in church very quietly looking at your Greek New Testament while the pastor's preaching, not trying to draw attention to yourself, but just very quietly. You see this, hade apen. But he said. But he said, or and he said. Now he said, or simply he said. So you're going to see this all the time. Apen, again, that's the second aorist, active indicative, third singular from Lego, I say or I speak.